Folks, my name is Thomas Dumas. I am the product planner on TruView Live, responsible for understanding and integrating customer needs and rolling those into product requirements. So I love to hear what your feedback is in terms of direction or ideas about the product. My topic now is going to be the VoIP testing. Brandon talked a whole bunch about the web, and we'll be going into VoIP in this section. A couple of slides, not much, and then some demo. So we've got two target customers for VoIP. One's the private network owner, the enterprise, who are trying to operate a VoIP system and know that they can place and receive calls in and out of their network, keep it running smoothly. So the other target customer would be a VoIP service provider. They have an interesting value proposition that we enable with TruView Live, which is increasing the amount of revenue they get for each customer. So they can provide a VoIP service to their customer, and then on top of that, they can provide monitoring and reporting with TruView Live and charge more for that. We've got features related to both of these segments, and we serve jobs in both of these segments with TruView Live. Yep. Want to talk about an actual customer that we have. So we're looking at this network diagram right now from one of our VoIP service providers that's using TruView Live. They've got their customers to which they provide VoIP service. They do it with a pair of data centers so it's a high availability thing. They use a combination of Cisco HCS plus their own soft switching platform in these two data centers. And this slide is what we see here. And what they want to be able to do is go to their customers and say, here's a report, your service has been green. And we can call all of your 200 locations. We're doing it every 2 minutes. Here's your report that shows that. For their usage internally, they can demonstrate that their infrastructure is working. So they have service availability, and then they have infrastructure availability. As the provider, they want to know if one of their data centers has gone down, and they always want to provide service to their customers. So this is a deployment that we're working with now. Very large scale, complex, multiple soft switches in there. And they are deploying our hardware pulses out at their customer sites. They're deploying virtual pulses in their data centers that are capable of simultaneously making hundreds of calls. So they can sweep all the sites every 2 minutes. That's what they want to do. So fundamentally, what we have here is these pulses talking to a call manager, registering with a call manager, doing the signaling with the call manager, and then having the media set up in between the pulses, just like a phone would do. So, whether your call manager is on-prem, you're hosting it, it's yours, you're the enterprise, it's doing all of that, have that responsibility, or you're paying for a service, you've got Vonage or Orange or one of these other hosted VoIP services, and you're the enterprise, you can make that work. The pulses will call that. So we've got alerts that come out on outages or quality problems with the VoIP, and then similar dashboards to what Brandon was showing you that give you the high-level view of the service, of the entire enterprise, and then the drill downs into specific metrics. So the pulses are set up. They're calling each other. They can also call phone numbers. So not just restricted to pulse. One of the reasons customers tell us they want phone numbers as the call is they may have a call center and there's an IVR system in place there, and that is always supposed to answer. And so they will place pulses out, either global pulses or virtual ones at their sites if they want, and ensure that 24/7 that call center answers the phone. Okay, so you can call pulse to pulse or pulse to phone. So we've kind of been going down this it's easy route quite a bit today, and and VoIP is a complicated story and a complicated technology with lots of moving parts. We've tried to, again, hit the easy button on that. So the pulses, our story is plug them into any phone, any jack you'd plug in a phone. So again, back to the remote office, it doesn't have a local IT support. You mail them a pulse, you say anywhere you'd put a phone, jack it in, the pulse boots like a phone, and then picks up its tests from TruView Live, much like we've seen with the web tests. And then you can start calling site to site or site to IVR, identifying availability of the service problems, figuring out if your infrastructure is working. Depending on where you put them and where you call from, you can get a more thorough or higher level picture of what's going on with your infrastructure. So finally, we tell you red or green or yellow on the call. Customer wants to know why, and we have a VoIP test now that goes deep, much deeper than the monitoring test, which is placing calls, so you can learn more about, dig into why you might be having a problem with a call.
One quick question. Can the pulse also add a cross-tag?
Can the pulse do what?
Add a cross-tag. So, for example, it's very common that every VoIP phone add a cross-tag to the packet.
QoS.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm from Germany.
Okay. So when you define the test, you can pick layer 3 QoS. So either DSCP or type of service. You can, however you think about it, you can enter that. Yep. Thanks. So we said it works like a phone. You guys said you were technical, so I need to score some points here, right, for having a bunch of protocols on the screen. It boots up, like we've said. It goes in, it talks to the switch with CDP and or LLDP, lets the switch know, I'm a phone, okay? I need power, I need this much power. So it runs a negotiation. It asks the switch about the voice VLAN, so it learns from CDP or LLDP which VLAN voice is on. That allows it to get an address on the voice VLAN. So it moves through DHCP where it gets the address. It also gets an address of a TFTP server, so it can get a config file, a Mac bundled config file, that scheme that's common with hardware phones. Out of the config file, you got your credentials. So where's the SIP proxy? What's my username? What's my password? What's my phone number? The whole set of information is pulled out of there. What codecs do I support? Then it registers with the SIP proxy and is ready to run tests.
So
Question?
It actually does register with Call Manager?
It does register with Call Manager. Yep.
And only SIP, that doesn't run Skinny or anything?
It does, correct. It only with SIP doesn't run Skinny, and it re-registers on a cycle so that the Call Manager doesn't think the phone has gone offline. All right.
Okay.
Safe.
Are you compatible with other vendors than Cisco?
We are. In fact, this is any SIP scheme will work. We have tested it with Vonage and Nextiva and Asterisk and a couple different service providers. So we've had good success with SIP on that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Keep going. All right. We're going to demonstrate this working. So Jason, off we go. I set this down. So we've seen this enterprise dashboard before, and if you're sharing your TruView Live deployment with other people in the company and they have 100 web tests and you've got your VoIP tests, well, you set up your filters there so you can see what you want to see. One of the scalability factors that is also here is if you have used any kind of convention in naming or tagging your pulses or your services, you can enter those up to the left there where it says filter, and get a handle on your scale issues. Like if everything was Northwest, then that was in the Northwest, you could tag them that way. So there's that scheme as well. What we see on the screen here across the top are the tests. In this case, the services are things like Pulse in Frankfurt calling Pulse in Dublin, or Pulse in Dublin calling IVR system, and then the rows show you which pulses are involved.
You're actually calling them. You're not simulating traffic.
These are calls.
Right, you're calling the host system, right? The audio path is between the two endpoints.
That's right.
Right, but the signaling path goes up to whatever system you're running. Call manager, asterisk, right, whatever.
Correct. Yeah, this is a for real call. So if you're having, like for example, if your customers are complaining, I pick up the phone and the delay to the dial tone is 8 seconds. Well, we'll measure that and we'll let you know. So it is deep, it's a real call. So we clicked on that. We see the now familiar view here that shows this is a Tokyo to Frankfurt. It's programmed for a G711 codec and oddly named Singapore and Tokyo involved in, my bad. So then we show the MOS on this screen here, okay? And if you want to get, and then as we're hovering over it, you can see dot by dot what's going on. If we want to see what played into that MOS score, then the expected test log that we've seen before is in here. And with the little dots on the side, we can see the loss latency and jitter for that particular test. So I've got these set up to run every 2 minutes, and so this is just happening. Good. Now we had talked about calling and picking, can I call a phone and is this a real call, and further details that we can get from the test now. So like we saw more depth in the test now on web, we have more depth in the test now on VoIP. Likewise, so we can jump into that. And so test now is an ad hoc thing, and what our customers do with it is if they see something trending in the monitoring test, then they'll go into a test now and run a specific test between those locations and dig into it and see what might be going on. So in this case, we actually, for the duration, we graph all of the metrics that we have. We show you the call flow. If you're having trouble with signaling and an early disconnect or something like that, you can see that. If you're wondering why a particular message came back with an error code, then you can click on it and see that as well. So you can see this is the kind of the deep dive story on VoIP.
That's almost the PCAP I wanted earlier, right?
It is almost the PCAP you wanted earlier. Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
But that's exactly why. For that kind of thing where you can actually see the transaction, it's perfect. Yep.
Okay.
Can I trigger other actions based on failures?
The actions that you can configure are the alerts. And so those come in email.
Okay,
That's
so I can't tell it, go run a trace route when you discover that something is bad has happened.
No, but that's a good idea.
You need to collect the evidence when the evidence
When
is
it's
available.
happening. Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense.
Rerouting makes the problem go away.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned we go much deeper with voice, that you said before, what you meant by that was you look at the 100, 200 messages for the invite.
We're collecting all of the signaling. Yeah.
And then beyond what sticking with Cisco, beyond what I can look at on a Cisco phone on the screen, is the extent of how deep you go. That's just looking at the invite messages that you just mentioned, right? Looking at
Whatever is in the call flow.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever the SIP messages are.
Okay.
So we're not, like for example, we're not capturing and showing you the DHCP or that kind of stuff, if that's what you mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any tie-in to existing like NetScout platforms? You know, I mean, like NetScout's pretty common, like on the InfiniStream platform and stuff to do voice call analysis. Is there any tie-in here that might say, hey, this alarm is tripping?
The tie-in to NetScout products is on the roadmap.
Okay.
We, as Bruce said, this acquisition just happened, and so top minds are working on that and recognizing that customers are going to want that.
Because I'm thinking what would be slick is when we start having SIP issues, the voice guys really want to capture, you know. So and we can't always be running those 24/7. So if this could say, hey, we're having an issue here, and we could talk to an InfiniStream or something and start pulling that data, so that when the NOC or someone called, we wouldn't have to spend 2 hours trying to recreate the issue. It could dynamically.
Yeah, and to the extent that you've got an on-premise VoIP system, you can have your InfiniStream there capturing the data, and you're good to go.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have strategy and roadmap around that exact topic.
Cool.
Okay, so you mentioned that it didn't display information about DHCP. What about CDP, LLDP? Where is it connected? Okay, I sent this thing out to a remote office and they plugged it in.
Okay.
Okay, and it's able to do something, but
If you want, okay, so we can actually show
where the hell
you,
did they plug it in?
the pulse screen, Jason. Yeah, sure, let's run the test while we're sitting on VoIP. Does anyone want to volunteer a phone number, or, you want to use mine? Okay, fine. So that's my phone number right here, and Jason has just clicked off a call. This is there's a pulse in Colorado Springs that's connected to a Nextiva hosted. There we are. There we go. So this is what's happening. We're measuring this call.
Is it measuring the voice characteristics going back at it?
It is measuring, okay, so let's get specific on that. Our loss,
Yeah, we could hear it. Sounded okay.
it sounded
Kodak
okay.
may be covering up some packet loss there, but
Well, codecs are good at covering up packet loss, okay? And so in this case here, there is some audio coming back from the phone. It's going through a cellular system, going through who knows what,
Right.
carrier to carrier. Eventually it's hitting the gateway on probably in Nextiva's hosted system. It hits a gateway. That audio, whatever it sounds like, good, bad, or indifferent, gets converted to packets, okay? And it is at between that point, and that's the point of measurement, okay? Because we're doing RTP math to calculate this MOS score, LQ MOS score. So we're not looking at the audio that's in the packets, we're looking at the arrival of the RTP. So that's how this measurement is made. And if you're in an enterprise and you're doing pulse to pulse, and you have these two pulses in your enterprise, you're actually getting a network, a good representation of what your network is doing with those packets. If you're hitting a gateway and going out to PSTN or cell, or if you're going from one call manager to another, so essentially through a gateway of some kind, then those measurements are at the end. Yep, makes sense.
what about measuring stuff for connectivity to MCUs? Conference calls.
Yeah, so one of our recognized IT initiatives, or that we see that our customers are taking us, has to do with unified communications. And so, on our roadmap, we will be looking at video or conference calls, other important aspects of unified communications. Yep. And that gets highly vendor specific in those cases. So whether it's a Skype for Business or a Cisco UC thing, that is where we'll be looking at vendor specific cases there. Okay. The question was about pulses and where are you?
Yes, I was just getting back to that.
Yep. I think and let's grab like a hardware pulse, like Colorado Springs. Yep. And then scrolling. Do we show?
We have the internal IP address of that network right there. And the external IP address that the TruView Life is service is seeing that pulse call from. Is that what you were looking for?
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, so a lot of information about the pulse here, even platform-based information like the amount of uptime and things like that.
If I hit
But you're probably looking for the SIP registration information. Is that what you were?
No, the
CDP,
LLDP, CDP would be great.
The name of the switch.
Okay,
I
so
would take the
Switch,
IP
the port you're
address.
connected to.
What?
that guy right there. No, I'm sorry, that's not going to work either. So if we were on this network, we could go to the embedded web server on that pulse, and we could get that information, exactly the nearest switch and the port that it was plugged into.
So
From here, we can't access the internal web server running on this hardware pulse. So,
but it does
right
it does
now.
listen to CDP or LLDP
Yeah.
and track it.
Yeah, it
I
does.
think that's a good point. It'd be great to be able to, if that could feed up again, that would be.
No,
Bring
you
that
plugged
to
it.
the
You
portal.
plugged it into the third one down. I wanted it into the second one.
That's right. Yeah, because the third one down isn't on the
For whatever.
isn't a trunk for the voice, right? Exactly. Understood.
Is there any value in it being able to send LLDP or CDP?
Well, it does.
It does as well?
Yeah.
Okay,
because
so we can see it on the
It
switches.
lets the switch know that it is a phone, and it sends its name to the switch. So if you do a CDP neighbors on the switch, you'll see the pulse in there.
But of course, this would be really nice to have in an API so that you could then automate a lot of the process.
Yeah. So the point that
Because
you
right now it would be highly manual.
Yeah.
And so what you guys are connecting on here is this notion that provide visibility into the physical deployment and help the customers manage where these things are and know that they're in the right place. Okay. Good.
And I'm thinking beyond Cisco as well, right? Hence mentioning LLDP. I
Yeah.
realize with
Yeah.
Cisco voice, CDP is kind of critical, but
Yeah.
for other systems and other switches, and I may not be running VoIP tests, if it could speak LLDP as well and advertise itself.
It does speak LDP.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it advertises itself as well.
Yep.
So I'll see it on the switch.
That's right. Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
I'm happy then.
Good. What about EDP? Do we need to go there?
I don't think so.
I think so.
Who could say?
Who can say? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so just real briefly here, you kind of flashed through this screen, Brandon, but we end up with this VoIP config here, and we show that, add a call manager, it's basically put in the domain and the port for the call manager, set thresholds, and configure pulses. So let's have a look at the pulse config there, Jason. Because the call manager, it's just like a name. That's all you really put in there. And just pick Colorado Springs one. Yep. And so what we see here in the VoIP config area is I've got this thing configured for manual. So I told the pulse, you're on Nextiva call manager. You got a number, you got a name, SIP user ID, password. There's another choice in there that's auto, in which is the case when the pulse is just being sent out and the telephony or the call manager administrator has put in the Mac bundled config file in the call manager, so that when that's all you would have to do is put in, let the call manager know that this MAC address is this kind of phone, and then the pulse, when it comes up, it would tell TruView Live what call manager it's using, and that would automatically get added to the system. And so if you're deploying 100 of these, then this manual config could be too many clicks for you, and what you would rather do is go into your call manager and say, hey, here's a list of MAC addresses, and they act like this kind of phone, and then you just ship them out and they turn on and they tell the system, the TruView Live system, about themselves, and so that eliminates this whole step. Make sense? Okay. What else? Pre-provisioning, we can talk about that. So we had a customer who said, my customer, this is a VoIP service provider, is never gonna let you put SIP credentials in your cloud because we don't trust your cloud. And so our whole scheme of put the credentials in and then the Pulse learns its credentials, or it wasn't going to work for these guys. And so what we had a mode in there in which the Pulse is given its credentials on a local network, and then when it boots up, it just uses them and never tells TruView Live about that. And so we've had to, as we encounter these different situations, this one being relative to storing of credentials in a cloud, that's how we handle that one.
You mentioned the deployment of 100 devices. Okay,
Yeah.
so I get a case of these at 100.
Yeah. You can do.
How do I get the MAC address do I have to type 100 MAC addresses into Call Manager, or do I just take my little handy dandy scanner and scan these things into an Excel spreadsheet or something?
It would be great if you could scan that. I think every box is the same though, so somewhere.
That's what I just deduced looking at
right.
the contents of the box and the codes on the box.
So from a scalability aspect on that is something that we're working on, and since we do have a customer right now who literally wants to use thousands of these, we're going to be working that out for sure. And yeah, it's got to be easier than entering manually. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Yeah, another question?
I was going to say, so ultimately, though, the way it's being presented is a little different than what we heard before, because now I have these devices that are going to register every 5 minutes. I want to leave them around my network. That's going to chew up licenses, thinking again in Cisco land. Is that how you're presenting it, as just leaving it, or as a troubleshooting only tool?
Well,
or I would mail it out like you said.
So there's there's the enterprise world and there's the service provider world. And service providers, they've got a recurring revenue stream on it, so they're happy to pay us dollars per month for the Pulse's running tests because they're charging their customers for that value-added service. So service providers have no problem with this because money's just passing through and being collected and everyone's getting their bit. In the enterprise case, we can take a look at enterprises, and you can find groups out there that are highly reactive and tend to feel like things work, and so we don't need to be proactively monitoring. We'll just solve problems quickly. And if you're encountering that person, you're hard pressed to convince them that they should permanently monitor and deploy anything, okay? And so in that group, we'll look at this in terms of troubleshooting. And so what they would typically do, and we've had some customers do this, is they'll say, well, probably got about 100 different places. I'm gonna buy 10 Pulses, and I'm gonna turn them on and off. Someone was asking about the turn on and off point, and that's what you'll get. Then you have the other segment of enterprises, which the person that's operating that place is all up and saying, you know what, I want to see a dashboard, I want to know what's going on in advance. They figured out that they can monetize that in their heads and make a case to their management and deploy the system as a monitoring tool. And so we're happy to sell to either camp. Of course, we would rather the I need every site instrumented. And that is why we made the cost of these things so low and provided the virtual, so that we're not, introducing this expensive item that could get lost or stolen, and they've lost money in that regard.
So what is, maybe you mentioned it, but what is the cost for each unit?
What's the cost of those things? $3.99? Are they on sale now? Today only. Act now. Okay. And then the virtual ones, of course, are just that.
Yep.
I have a question. Do you have any plans for people that want to host the server component in their own cloud? So if you don't want your data in a public space, you want your data in your data center, are there plans to have the servers in your own infrastructure?
We have heard that, requests for that. And so there have been, again, to sort of segment that problem or that question, there are a number of European countries who, number one, say, we don't want our data in the United States.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have some EU hosting plans that we would stand up a TruView Live service in particular countries in Europe, trying to meet the safe harbor law, which I guess recently has gone a different direction. And so, when we get those requests, we will take them down. And then there's the next step, which is the customer that's going to say, I don't want my stuff anywhere but my network. And interesting point, because the earlier question about integration with NetScout, InfiniStream and Ingenious One implies that it's going on-premise, right? Because that's an on-premise solution. And so that is, once we get that going, then you kind of have it from there. So I would say, to your question, there is a plan around that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Might make you buy an Ingenious system, but we're fine with that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I'm just thinking in the context of some security projects that I'm worked on, and whether you like it or not, there's often a requirement that I can't have little web servers all over the network calling home.
You were the guy that tweeted that.
I was, yeah.
All right.
You must have been sitting then.
Yes, sir.
But I like the tool. I mean, this is something that, who doesn't like network monitoring and close to real time, and that's fantastic. But sometimes the business or the security requirement doesn't allow that. Just thinking about having those call home features, which is cool to be able to log into a web interface from anywhere, and your remote guys that are in wherever on a business trip with a laptop. I mean, that's really compelling. So I guess I'm just piggybacking off of what Dominic said, bringing that in-house at some point. But that's a different product or a different presentation. Right?
That's right. We wouldn't be up here going, like Brandon was saying, no servers, no.
Right. No, and I understand that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just that's a different path altogether. But I guess I would be remiss if I didn't bring it up.
It's one thing to send data. Is there an option to turn off the web server, disable the web server?
On the Pulse.
Yeah, I mean, if we ran a port scan on it now, is it going to light up like a Christmas tree with all the recent, issues around web servers?
Well, there's a couple of points. I think Brandon wants to say something here, and I'm going to let him.
To say it can be secured. There's not an option to turn it off, though.
Yeah.
But it can be secured. So nobody can just pull up an IP address and start tinkering with your pulses.
So on like a PCI scan, it's not going to show up with 10 different vulnerabilities that are, no matter how vague or abstract, they still show up on a security scan, and the security team is going to again,
Yeah,
to Phil's point, they're going to scream like a bloody murder.
So what ports are we going to find open, Brandon?
80.
80? Okay.
443? No SSL? 443?
No, what's the SSL port? 443 or?
Yeah, 80? What?
So I'm just checking that it does, locally it does support SSL
Talking
rather
to
than just
the
port
Pulse.
80. Please.
To that embedded web service, it's 80. It's not encrypted. It's from your machine to the pulse on the same switch. No SSL involved. SSL involves a named server. Challenging to do. We could do some other types of encryption, but for the purpose of that embedded web server, it's over 80.
Let me ask the question, I guess, in a little different way.
Okay.
From the time that the Heartbleed vulnerability was made public, how long did it take you guys to patch your devices?
Yeah, so that actually happened before we were live. So.
Oh, it did. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So lucky for
in
me.
theory, I
lucky
guess.
for me right now. We can
How long would
force
you think
updates to these things.
Okay.
So we can either push out an update and let you upgrade at your convenience,
Okay.
or in the case of a security situation like a Heartbleed situation,
Yeah.
we can force updates and push them out. So we would have to patch SSL, run a build, push it to servers, force.
Yeah, because a lot of times it's not really just like the ports that are open that I really care about. It's a lot of these embedded devices have sort of monolithic. They don't really have an update structure like that.
Yeah.
So being able to do that
so we do.
is what I care
It's
about.
easy to push these things out. We can do a mass update anytime we see fit.
Sweet.
We prefer not to do that, but in the case of a Heartbleed like SSL situation, we absolutely can.
Yeah, I mean, this is getting into the weeds. This is we're getting into nation state attacks, but
Well, hopefully we're going to let you decide when you want to update your stuff, but we can if we need to.
cool.
I never realized that a nation state attacks is NSA. That's amazing. Abbreviation. Thank you.
Cool.